All right, here we go. Everything I've learned about 3D virtual reality video creation in under 30 minutes, and why Fujifilm and any other digital medium format camera manufacturer is sitting on a gold mine if they make the correct lens and camera body combo. I'm covered in grass stains, and that's on purpose. I don't know, in a world post-COVID, I think authenticity goes a long way. So in this video, I want to talk about the state of shooting virtual reality content, the state of creating three-dimensional videos, left eye, right eye. It's called side-by-side stereoscopic 180-degree 3D videos. But for the sake of this video, from here on out, I'm just going to call it VR video. We're currently in a really interesting spot with technology where the ability to view VR content is finally legit. We're finally there. It's like finally good enough for, well, anyone who can afford it to purchase and have a very immersive experience. And I would argue that the technology is only going to become more and more ubiquitous. Eventually, maybe in the next 5 years, it's going to be as commonplace as someone having like a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox or a gaming PC or a large television in their house. The technology, however, for capturing 3D videos for cameras shooting VR, that technology hasn't nearly evolved as quickly as the ability to view the content. So in this video, Fuji, if you're listening, I'm going to tell you what a dream VR camera looks like. And also Fuji, listen up, because y'alls are sitting on a gold mine if you guys do a slight camera pivot. If Fuji does a slight camera pivot, they could own, like, undisputed king of VR content. I'm gonna throw a bunch of numbers out in this video, and I'm gonna still try to make it understandable to the average person, but it is more geared towards people who understand cameras. So I'm gonna try to make it understandable, but there's gonna be a lot of numbers thrown out. I'm gonna start with sensor size. Large sensors do two things that are very interesting. The larger the sensor, the more light it can gather, so the better it will be in low light, and the fewer lights you have to set up. So if you're shooting video, every Hollywood set, even documentaries, most of the time, they're setting up lights. They're setting up artificial lighting. The whole point of virtual reality content is that you can go places and see places that you wouldn't normally be able to go and see. And authenticity. That's like the whole point of VR content, VR videos, is that you can be like authentically in the scene. So best case scenario, VR content is like people who are stuck in classrooms or people who are stuck in wheelchairs. They can live vicariously through this 3D video and be places they can't reach. And so one of the main goals of it should be to be as authentic as possible. And so the fewer lights you can set up, the less you can tamper with the scene, the more authentic it's going to feel. So right out of the gate, when you say VR content, virtual reality video, immediately like large sensors are the candidate. More than that, or alongside that, large sensors, the larger you go on a sensor, the more three-dimensional and lifelike the footage looks, or the pictures, but in this case, footage. So large sensors do two things: gather more light, which means fewer lights that you got to set up, and make things look more lifelike, three-dimensional. So if you look at a medium format sensor, which is like the largest sensor you can shoot video on these days, the footage and the pictures look really three-dimensional and lifelike. Even going down one sensor size to full-frame sensors, which are becoming more and more popular in Hollywood movies, and is like the sweet spot for photography. Most professional photographers are shooting on full frame. Those sensors already don't look as three-dimensional as medium format. And then if you go down to Super 35 and APS-C size sensors, they're basically the same size sensor, also known as crop sensors, all of a sudden your shot looks much more compressed, like way more compressed. A lot of that three-dimensionality goes away and it's replaced with what we know as that filmic look. I'll say one more thing. You don't want a lot of pixel noise in your virtual reality videos. Like, you know, that film grain, you want as little of that as possible because you want to be totally immersed in the scene as if it's real life. And so light gathering ability, low light gathering ability, dark, dim environments is incredibly important for virtual reality content. And that means that the pixel pitch, the size of each individual light gathering pixel on the sensor, needs to be 5 micrometers or more. 5 or more micrometers. When you look at all of the good low light cameras on the market right now, any one of them that's good at shooting in the dark, all of them have a pixel pitch of more than 5 micrometers. And all of them that start to struggle where they don't have a reputation for being good at low light, they're all below 5. Or right around below 5, like 4.5 is still pretty good. But you go below 5 and they start to struggle in low light. It's a physics problem, right? Also, for virtual reality content to look good, it needs to be 4,000 pixels per eye. 4,000 by 4,000 per eye. So it needs to be like true 8K video, which means like 8,000 across, 4,000 up and down. It's the sweet spot between like file sizes not being astronomical and still having enough resolution so that it's totally immersive. So you crunch the numbers on that and you say, we know that the sensor has to have a pixel pitch of 5 micrometers, and we know that the total pixel count needs to be 4,000 by 4,000 times 2. And all of a sudden, the natural candidate for what sensor size for virtual reality is good starts to emerge. And spoiler alert, it's like the bigger the better. The bigger the sensor, the better. So hold that thought, and I'm going to talk about what currently exists on the market. When you look at the best virtual reality content cameras right now, they are broken down into a couple of different categories. The people who do this like super professionally day in and day out, what they do is they mount 2 full-frame cameras side by side and they shoot 4K on those 2 cameras, and then they synchronize it and repair it all in post-production. But even that is kind of ironic because a full-frame sensor is 36 millimeters by 24 millimeters. But all of the VR lenses made for full-frame, the best VR lens that you can get that mounts on a full-frame camera still crops down the sensor to like a 20 millimeter image. So even if you were to shoot on like the best full-frame camera at 4K or even 6K 60 frames per second per eye, like a huge chunk of the sensor isn't even being used. And by the time you stretch it all out, it's as if you shot that video on a Super 35 millimeter sensor. It's as if you shot it on a crop sensor. So even the very best professional setup, which is not user-friendly because you're having to synchronize 2 cameras, even that one, by the time you get it into your editing software, is as if you shot on 2 crop sensor cameras. So immediately, just the math on that, you're not getting the 3-dimensionality of a large sensor, and you're probably not even getting the resolution of true 4x4K per eye. Another thing that I've seen on the market, the other type of VR camera that you can go out and buy that's really popular, it has a micro four thirds sensor per eye. It doesn't end up being an 8K VR video. It ends up being like a 5K VR. The resolution of your eyeball and everything, 8K is the standard. So what else exists? Right now, probably the strongest all-around contender is Canon. Canon came out with the R5C, which is an amazing full-frame cinema-capable camera that has a true 8K sensor on it, and they came out with a VR lens. What I mean by VR lens is it's got 2 fisheye lenses at the distance of the human eye, and then it feeds that image onto the sensor side by side. So when you look at the footage, it's got two circles right next to each other on the sensor, on the footage. Each circle represents what each eye sees. The VR lens for that Canon, it's pretty good. It's good enough. The distance between the lenses is a little bit too tight. I think it's at like 60 or 62 millimeters. The distance between the lenses should be 65 millimeters. That's a different conversation altogether. But Canon has come up with this setup where on a full frame camera, one full frame camera sensor, it smushes two fisheye lens recordings and shoots at 8K 60 frames per second. However, when you look at that footage, it's not going the full width of the sensor. Neither eye is going the full width of the sensor. Canon should have magnified each fisheye lens a little bit so it maximizes the sensor more. If Canon redesigned that lens, it should overlap slightly. The sensor is 36 millimeters across, cut in half, so that is 18 millimeter image circle, except, again, it's a version 1 of the lens, and it's only recording like 16 or 17 millimeters image circle per eye. So even there, you're not getting true 8K per eye. You're not. Or 4K per eye. You're not getting true 4K per eye. So again, you're down to like a crop sensor recording size, which means it doesn't look super three-dimensional. It's not great at low light. The pixel pitch of the R5C is like well below 5 micrometer pixel pitch. Micrometer. So once again, even the best, like you can go online and buy it right now and shoot great VR. Even the best of the best on the market right now falls short of what the industry standard should be. So, and by the way, if I had all this disposable income right now, the Canon R5C with the VR lens is what I would buy. It's pretty good, but it's not like, it's not good enough to take full advantage of something like an Apple Vision Pro VR headset. I'm going to add an honorable mention, which would be the red V-Raptor VV VistaVision 8K cinema camera with the Canon RF mount. That sensor is a little bit bigger. Instead of 36 millimeters across, it's 40.96 millimeters across. The RF mount means that you can currently mount the VR lens on that camera and shoot with it the same way you would shoot with the R5C. However, you're still getting that 17 millimeter image circle. So the reason it's an honorable mention is that Canon would have to redesign their VR lens slightly bigger with slightly larger image circles, which would be bigger than the best VR cameras currently on the market, and it would be true 4K per eye. And it has a pixel pitch of almost exactly 5 micrometers. Honestly, that red camera will probably be the preferred option for most VR content creators if Canon makes a VR lens specifically for that camera. However, for professional VR content creators, they're going to want something that can also take pictures, and they're going to want something portable. So we still have to look elsewhere if we want the very best camera for VR capture. What I'm just going to describe for the rest of this video is what camera would be necessary to take full advantage of an Apple Vision Pro headset. So the three options that are considered real professional VR video capture is you use two full frame cameras in a yoke. They're yoked together, which again, because of the available lenses in the world right now for VR, the available fisheye lenses, it still ends up being a crop sensor recording. The Canon R5C is like a buy it and shoot VR, and it's simple and it's easy to use and it's mistake proof. And again, it ends up being, it's even smaller than if you shot on two full frame cameras. And then the third option that's on the market is a dedicated, like, you get two micro four thirds cameras and shoot micro four thirds per eye. But again, with the available lenses and by the time it's stretched out and everything, you're shooting on smaller than a micro four thirds sensor per eye. You end up shooting closer to like a 1-inch sensor per eye. So by necessity, by like elimination, what's left? What's left is a medium format camera. A medium format camera shoots at 44 millimeters by 33 millimeters approximately. I'm thinking about the Fuji line, the Fuji GFX line of cameras. When you split the horizontal in half, because again, you're having to record one eye on one side of the sensor and the other eye on the other side of the sensor. When you split that sensor in half, you get 22 millimeters. 44 millimeters split in half, 22 millimeters. 22 millimeters, if that was a slightly over 8K sensor at 44 millimeters by 33 millimeters, the math checks out. You get approximately a 5 micrometer pixel pitch. You get 22 millimeters per eye if they totally maximize it out. 22 millimeters per eye puts you back at approximately the three-dimensionality of just a little bit less than a full frame camera. So it's in between a Super 35 and a full frame camera, which anything above a Super 35 millimeter sensor starts to look three-dimensional. So again, the math checks out. It satisfies the minimum viable product, the minimum viable industry standard product. So medium format, it checks the box of the sensor look feeling three-dimensional. It checks the box of the pixel pitch being big enough to be good at low light gathering, which again means fewer lights being set up, which means being able to record more authentic scenes. And it checks the box of resolution. So now we talk about dream camera. Fuji, make this camera and own the VR market. We'll start with the lens. Get permission to copy Canon's VR lens. Make it somewhere around 64, 65 millimeters between the lenses, between the eyes, IDP. It's called IDP. 64 millimeters, 65 millimeters, or adjustable. 200-degree field of view, maximizing the width of the sensor. So two 22 millimeter image circles projected on the sensor. That's step number one, make that lens. Or Canon, make a version of your Canon lens that mounts on GFX. Some sort of collaboration. Step number two, here's the camera that Fuji needs to make. Fuji makes a new 50 megapixel camera that is geared towards video, that can shoot a little more than 8K at 60 frames per second. On a medium format Fuji camera, you can call it the GFX 50X. Shoots ProRes, RAW, ProRes, HQ, can record externally, RAW can record externally, 444. It's none of this like HEVC 420 nonsense. It has to be like a legitimate 422 or better codec. Next, it can record obviously in log footage so that you can stretch it out in post. It would have to have a minimum of 12 strong stops of dynamic range. So let's say 14 stops factory claim, because it's usually like 2 stops less. Flippy screen. Fuji, all your cameras going forward should have a flippy screen. Not the fold out screen, not the fold like diagonal screen, but the completely rotating, articulating, flip out screen. That's the standard. That's the industry standard now. Every camera manufacturer that has switched to the flippy screen, everyone loves it. HDMI cable, mini XLR port, dual reversible card slots. I could tell you more, but those are like the base requirements. If Fuji made that camera, they would own the VR market. If Fuji makes this video-centric 50 megapixel camera and a VR lens, they will own, just by logical necessity, just by physics necessity, they will own the VR market. Everyone who's trying to shoot VR video will want that camera. They will sell so many cameras. Again, it's a physics problem. In order to get the 5 micrometer pixel pitch, in order to get the 8K, the low light gathering and the resolution, you are, by default, you're pushed to medium format size sensor. And Fuji, you're sitting on a gold mine. All you gotta do is make those two things. A VR lens and a GFX 50X videocentric with a flippy screen. So there you go. Those are like where the industry is headed. Again, in some summary, VR headsets are eventually going to become relatively household products. And they're already very good, and VR content is falling behind. And so the cameras, in order to record the VR content, need to catch up. So then you crunch the numbers on all the physics and capability and attributes like the three-dimensionality, and you are defaulted to medium format as the best place to record VR video. And all the pieces are there. Canon proved that you can make a really good VR lens. Fuji with the GFX 100 II proved that you can shoot decent 8K footage on a medium format sensor. Now all they need to do is make a faster low light version of the GFX 100 II and adopt the Canon lens. So all of the technology is there. Someone just needs to make it. So there you go. There's the state of virtual reality in 2024 and what it's going to take for professionals to make truly great, truly immersive VR video. So I hope that this video was helpful. I hope that there was something in here that was useful and that there was some learning, that it was explained clearly and understandably. I'd really love for Fuji to make that camera and that lens. And other than that, God bless. Have a wonderful rest of your day and the weeks ahead.